Welcome to Tales from the Gutter. For the month of October, we are focusing each week on a specific type of horror or spooky comic. This week, we are focused on comics featuring monsters, and we each read October Faction, iZombie, and Afterlife with Archie. Hello, welcome to Tales from the Gutters. This week we're reading monster comics. We each kind of decided on 3 comics in particular that we wanted to discuss, and we kind of wanted to talk about monster comics in general. I'm Kayleigh Fleeman.
I'm Cade Reynolds.
I'm Kit DeForge.
I'm Kirbotron 2000.
And this week we read October Faction by Steve Niles and Damien Worm, iZombie by Chris Roberson and Mike and Laura Allred, and Afterlife with Archie by Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa and Francesco Francavilla. And I'm sorry if I butchered any of those names. So, what book do we want to start with?
iZombie.
iZombie? Okay. Kirby spoke first, so that's the one that we're going with. So,
It's alphabetical, so.
Oh, that's an excellent point. Wow, you are so organized.
Afterlife.
I was waiting to see if somebody could recognize that.
I only alphabetize for a living. I had to think about it. Shit on me.
I was like,
God.
yeah, no, that's right. Sure.
I was
He
like,
totally comes first.
Seems legit.
well, you know, Mike Allred, therefore there's an A.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
All right, all right.
So I know Kirby and I have read iZombie a lot and have liked it a lot. Mm-hmm. So, Kirby, do you want to kind of introduce the plot?
well, essentially, it's about this girl, and she's a zombie, and she works as, like, a grave digger, and no one knows she's a zombie, and she eats brains because she's a zombie. But she also has a ghost friend from the 60s who's really cute. Mm-hmm. And she has another friend who's a were-terrier who got bit by a terrier. It's been a while since I've read it. But, and so he, on a full moon, I think, he turns into a terrier.
Yeah.
Like a dog. And she kind of goes around and, like, helps people with, like, moving to the next stage of their life, or she'll, like, eat a brain and she'll kind of help with whatever it was, like, that was keeping them back. Yeah.
Closure to families and stuff like that.
Exactly. And there's a bunch of other characters. Like, I just flipped through it before, like, coming here today, and I totally forgot about the vampire sorority girls.
Oh my god, I love... So, the reason why this kind of made our list of a monster comic is because it doesn't only focus on zombies. There's ghosts, were-terriers, there is an entire sorority full of vampires. They have, like, skinwalkers,
Mummies.
basically, yeah, mummies, basically the Spectre, but called, what is he called? Like the Phantom or something, like something where it's like totally not the Spectre, guys. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so there are a wide range of monsters, and they, even if you don't get to see it in the comic, they will talk about other monsters that exist. And it's really great because a lot of these types of comics will try to redefine monsters, or modern fiction will try to redefine, say, vampires and make them sparkly. But in this case, it'll redefine monsters in a way that makes them slightly more modern, but also keeps with their original themes. So in iZombie, you have your traditional shambling zombie, but you can avoid becoming that even if you have been turned into a zombie by eating fresh brains and using the memories of the people you've eaten to keep your own memories alive. And I just think it's a really cool examination of monsters in like modern times, because for all intents and purposes, monsters really couldn't exist in our modern culture in the way that they have in the past, because we have cameras everywhere and somebody would document that. But the way that they present it in this comic is just kind of like, no, they live among us. They're just not as outright as they have been in the past.
Well,
they're a bit more discreet.
Yeah, they just kind of like hang out and like she's a grave digger, and she's a grave digger, so she has access to brains, but no one knows that she's a zombie. She's just like, yep, today was a tough day at work. Gonna go home. But then she doesn't go home. She lives at the
spoiler alert, yeah. She lives in the graveyard.
She lives there. That's her home.
Yeah. But one of the things that's so great and so charming about this comic is the art in particular. Mike and Laura Allred do fantastic work, and they have a lot of old world charm to their comics, and I think that's what makes this really work, because the premise is so fantastic, especially towards the later volumes. There are 4 volumes total. The premise is so fantastic and so far out there that it's hard. It's not as easy to follow along with as the first 2 volumes, but the art makes it interesting and engaging in a way that you still want to stay engaged.
Well, the art kind of does a lot as far as, well, the comic itself in plot in the actual panels has a lot of direct acknowledgement to those cute older kind of spooky comics and stuff too. It's there's a couple little takeoffs in the second volume that we were looking at before, I think. Kirby, you were flipping with this with me before, and well, you were talking about the Gilbert Hernandez stuff, and I think that Mike and Laura's style fits really well in this too, because it already is so reminiscent of like what we think of when we think of classic comics, anyway. But you get into this little back section in the second book here, and they have kind of like a Casper, you know, like in the style of Casper the Friendly Ghost. They have this little special bit here about that, so they can make a joke about those sort of spooky cute comics that were really popular in like the 40s or something. But then you also get a bunch going on with having characters that are from different time periods too. So particularly having like the 60s detective sort of thing that they had going with Ellie, I think was her name. Ellie.
I think
there we are. Yeah,
I always think it's Daisy for some.
I don't know.
Well,
too.
Yeah.
Actually,
she looks like a daisy, doesn't she?
Maybe it was you and I who were like, her name's totally Daisy, and then we just convinced each other that her name was Daisy. But
maybe one of us is trolling the other one, like hardcore.
Well,
it's gotten so bad we don't remember who started it.
Yeah.
Well, Kirby had me read Madman by Allred a little bit ago, and I couldn't help but think about how he's hopping through these different styles of artists in this book that you had lent me before, and think that maybe this is something that's enjoyable to kind of like stretch your legs and get doodly and keep it fun, because you have this like Scooby-Doo sort of style thing with the eyewear terrier in there. And I think that the reason that's important for this particular comic is, as Kayleigh mentioned, you can't really have monsters or these type of monsters work in this day and age, not just with the cameras and everything, but with the fact that tastes have changed as far as what's scary. So if you kind of throw out the idea that you're intending to scare people per se with it, but still use the horror elements in a way that's charming and familiar, that you can still enjoy these sort of tropes. And I think that's what interested me in this book, is that it was so charming about using the zombies and everything else, especially when I think we've become oversaturated on zombies in the market right now. Just everybody using zombies. And admittedly, that was my first hesitance to wanting to read this book at all, was that I remember when it started coming out, I mostly picked up anything Vertigo I could find or things like that. And I just kind of rolled my eyes like, oh, God, another zombie book. And didn't want to give it the time of day. But Kayleigh, you had spoken so highly about it that I was like, well, I don't really know if this is going to be my thing. But they abandoned really the whole idea of like how terrifying zombies are. And instead took the core elements of what a zombie is, I guess, and played with it to make it fun and accessible for people. So, I like it.
No good.
Yeah.
I also read it on a Kayleigh recommendation, but I think it was more of like, oh, this thing is good, you should read it. I was like, okay.
Yeah. Well, it was mostly like, hey, you know that artist that you really, really like? And
yeah, that's what it was.
his wife that you also really, really like? They did a thing. You would probably like it.
And I was like, wait, Mike Allred? Yeah!
So I was actually dreading reading this, although the reason for that is because all of the previews for this in the other Vertigo titles, when they would be at the end of the book, were not colored. So, and I have a really hard time with Mike Allred's art when it's not colored by Laura Allred. And so I thought that it was going to be, 5 issues of that, and it was not that. And so I was very pleased with that. And I actually ended up really enjoying this book. It was really fun. I loved Spot. I don't remember his real name. Scott.
That's right, yeah.
But, the friend comes over, finds out he's a were-terrier, and they're sitting around playing video games. I loved that scene. I think there's very neat elements in here. Things that you wouldn't normally see in a book.
Yeah. So if you are interested in... I don't want to say if you're interested in zombies, because, Kit, you brought up a really great point. The market is pretty oversaturated with them. I think they're kind of our current obsession as far as monsters go, although that's starting to stray, but you still have new zombie shows every other week. But if you are interested in spooky cute or kind of an examination of Western monsters, or even just like Lovecraft, honestly, like if you like Lovecraft, you'll probably enjoy this book, and you should pick it up. So for our next book, I want to talk about its exact opposite, which is Afterlife with Archie, which starts out, you would think, being cute because it's Archie, and I don't know anything about Archie other than Betty and Veronica have been fighting for him for like decades.
60 years.
500 years.
Yeah, 1 million years.
A lot. A cool 1 million years.
And he's apparently worth fighting over or something. I don't know. Like, everything I know about Archie, I know from looking at the covers while I'm waiting in line at the grocery store. And that's it. I have never read an actual Archie comic. But I picked up Afterlife with Archie on recommendation from Eric Mannix, who was talking about it and how cool it was. And the thing that kind of sold me on it was that you didn't need to know anything about Archie, really, other than what you've probably seen while you're waiting in line at the grocery store. But this is a genuine horror comic that focuses on Jughead originally, who gets infected, and he is kind of patient zero for this zombie virus, and he and his dog end up infecting like half of Riverdale, and Archie, Betty, Veronica, and a handful of other survivors are trying to make their way through it and trying to survive and escape Riverdale. You also get to see Sabrina, who's like one of my favorite characters.
Dude, when I saw that, I was like, is that Sabrina the Teenage Witch? And then she was like, my aunt. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. So I didn't know this actually until I until this was announced, Sabrina is an Archie title, and she originated from Archie comics. I had no idea.
I didn't know that
was
either. Joe told me. I was like, "Did you know Sabrina the Teenage Witch is in that Archie book?" And he was like, "Yeah, she's like a Archie character." And I was like, "Oh,
yeah." I had no
she was
idea.
just a WB character. What channel was she on?
Yeah,
TGIF.
TGI. Yeah, that's
Didn't she
right.
have a TV show? But yeah, so the thing that's so great about this book, it's a very standard horror in many ways. The thing that makes it charming is that you already recognize the characters, so you don't really need to build a whole lot of character development or really establish who people are, because you're already at least slightly familiar with the concepts of these characters, because they're so built into tropes, and so much other media has taken and copied from these core set of characters that by the time that you see them reimagined, you recognize them.
Or as soon as they open their mouths, you know exactly who they are.
Exactly, yeah. And you know exactly the type of person that they're going to be, and you know the roles that they're going to play. It's kind of how that plays into this story that makes it interesting. And the number one thing about this book is the art, which is fantastic.
Scary.
Yeah, it's horrific without being, I guess, gross. Like there's a tendency in horror specifically, or anything that's supposed to be horrific, to make your art really gross. And the thing that comes to mind would be like Hellblazer. When you see hell and it's just like skin and organs and just really disgusting, it's kind of hard to get through those panels because it's just so disgusting to look at. This has a lot of gore, and the violence is done in a way that's like really dynamic, and it shows you what you need to see in order to understand the brutality of the scene, but it doesn't overdo it, and I really appreciate that. Another point would be that it's just like, it's a fun read. Honestly, you don't, like I said, don't need to know anything about Archie. You just need to be willing to give these characters a second chance and see sort of how things end up. And I think it's really cool. For this, I think we all just read the first trade. Maybe a little bit past that, but I don't know how much more.
More than one trade?
There's like, I read like the first, there were 8 issues that I got legally, and and like the last, I think I got to the 7th one because the first story arc ended, and then it started to get into more of Sabrina like having dreams and stuff. So I don't know if that was part of the trade.
Yeah, so that wasn't part of the first trade.
That was not.
But yeah, so it's like, I know it's still coming out currently. I don't think that they've collected the second trade yet.
That one seems good. I'm probably gonna read that one.
Yeah, no, it's pretty great. And also, if you read this and you enjoy this, or if maybe it's not quite your cup of tea, but the idea of playing around with Archie characters is interesting, there is a new series coming out called The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. They are on issue 4 right now. They might be on 5 by the time that this releases, but I'm not quite certain. It's fantastic. It follows Sabrina. She's kind of trying to figure out more information about her dad and her mother, who supposedly died in childbirth, and she is also being haunted by like this demon woman, and she's trying to piece everything together. So it's a mystery as well as a horror, and it's really great.
Have you read any of it?
Yeah.
Did she have bad dreams in it?
No, I don't.
That was the one that I was reading, and she was having like bad dreams, and she was like, "Why am I having these dreams? Me and Harvey Hinkle need to get married."
No, I think the 2 stories happen separate from each other. Yeah. Because in this one, in The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, it's when she comes back to Riverdale. So she's been gone, and she's starting her first week of high school. So it might happen before if they happen in the same universe, but I don't know if they do. That would be interesting to find out. Yeah. Any more thoughts on Afterlife with Archie?
Actually, yeah. There was a scene I wanted to point to in this book that was very emotional to me, and that was the dog sacrificing himself.
Oh my god.
I cried.
I cried. Yeah. Yeah, no, the writing in this is so fantastic that you get about one issue in and then you bawl your eyes out like a baby, even though you're not really invested in any of these characters yet. And
I hate all these characters. Why am I crying?
Yeah, no, and actually Mannix had the same reaction because he's like tweeting about it. He's like, well, I'm one issue in and I'm bawling my eyes out like a child. And yeah, no, it's good writing. And the characters really do get to you. You really find yourself invested in these characters that you think that you would not be.
Yeah, I was surprised at that too. Like, I never read an Archie book either, and I thought that I was like, oh, Scooby-Doo fun I don't know. Like, I've never read Archie. I didn't know what to expect. And it was definitely a lot different than I thought. And even in the beginning, like I was like I had this mindset that it would be kind of cutesy or whatever. But then it started to kind of I was getting a lot of maybe Stephen King from it too, with like the pet cemetery thing where the dog was like brought back and then the dog was Cujo and then like just everything. And then I think the one that really got me is when he had to kill his dad.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
That was
Didn't like a little childhood murder every now and again.
I mean just
just like murdered your
Yeah.
nostalgia a little bit.
But yeah,
I am glad for social media for getting this book out there and making it as big as it was. Or making it as big as it is. It was actually like one of Gawker's top picks for like 2 months. So that was pretty cool.
Didn't this just happen basically because of a variant cover? I think I was reading something like that where basically somebody did a variant cover, a zombie variant cover or something in Archie Comics, and they were just like, fuck it. And then they...
Yep.
They actually ran that one.
Yeah.
They talk about that a little in the back of the trade.
Also, there is Archie versus Predator, which I have not read, but it seems I might be way off base. Maybe a listener can correct me, but it seems cuter than this one based on the covers, because I believe it is the same. It's the same style of art as in the Archie Digest, not in Afterlife or Sabrina.
Archie's pretty, like, usually along the track of the Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein sort of thing anyway. It's like they've done mashups in quite a few things. Like, I remember Shelving, they did, like, an Archie Glee thing, and then they just do, like, Archie and vampires was a thing that happened for a little bit there, too. I remember shelving some of those individual issues in the teen section and distinctly thinking to myself, what fucking teenager reads Archie these days? Like, seriously, I was sitting there thinking, who the hell's going to read Archie past, like, the 60s, like 50s or 60s? And I guess that's quite different. I guess there's a little more staying power than I realized or something, because they're still just cranking out books, again, these, like, mashup books, but circulation numbers are still on it. It's weird. I find it super weird.
My only previous encounter with Archie was when I was a boy. They actually would put the mini comics in cereal boxes.
Yeah.
So you get those 6-page Archie comics. And they were never really any good. I mean, I loved them as a kid because I'm like, comic books, yay! I get to collect these. Let's get all the cereal boxes, Dad. And
it was just like little stories of like Archie eating Lucky Charms to like sell you more Lucky Charms.
Yeah. Or Jughead eating Lucky Charms because Jughead eats everything, and now his hunger never rests.
Yeah, because now he eats people too.
Got real.
Yeah. Well, all right.
Okay. Are we done talking about Archie? What type of reader do you guys think would enjoy this?
Little kids.
The tiniest,
Not little kids.
I would be amused actually to see reactions from my teen patrons, honestly. If I were to be like, Archie comic, especially they're just like, why do we have these? I get the same thing from the teenagers, like, aren't these supposed to be in kids? And I'm like, apparently not. Apparently they relate to you. So.
Well, they're in high school, right?
Yeah.
In a mansion all alone. Mm-hmm. There's a pool or something. I don't know.
Yeah, you know what? Why not have a pool party in the middle of the apocalypse? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. That
Like,
makes
frick
sense.
off, man.
Dude, the zombies
party.
can't swim. We know
Obviously,
that, right?
Yeah.
All he can do is the dead man float.
I was just thinking in one of the Of the Dead movies, they a bunch of kids did that.
Yeah.
It seems like anytime that's convenient, a bunch of kids will do something really stupid that puts them in a vulnerable position.
Well, iZombie, though, actually, what I need to pull out this quote because it's relevant and I have an excuse to, and you just said it. It's right there. Let's see. Yeah. Trisha, have you never seen a horror movie before? A bunch of kids out in the woods at night, some of them sneak off to drink and smooch and stuff. You know, it's the first kids that an axe-wielding maniac is going to chop to pieces every time. I think the same thing applies to pool parties, because any body of water that could foster bikinis also, I think, means we need to see more than just skin. We need to see guts.
Also, those kids in the bikinis in the water, they're going to need a bigger boat.
You know what? I think it's possible, Kirby, that many of their problems could be alleviated by a larger boat.
I think so too,
and perhaps some barrels. Not with two. No, not with two. He can't. Kirby likes sharks. Just, I want the whole world to know.
I love sharks.
Sharks are great. They are good.
Come out as a sharkosexual. Do it now, so everyone can hear.
I don't think there are any good shark monster comics. Or
well, there's that shark guy in the Max.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
I got that guy.
Yeah.
That's
I think he gets
That's a real
defeated.
question for everyone. Actually, that's a real question for everyone. Anybody who is listening, please point any comics related to shark monsters to our attention, because now I'm really curious.
Even just sharks. Just
Frick
sharks
off.
in
Just
general.
everything about sharks.
Yeah.
Screw it.
If there's just a shark actually like mentioned, or if there's a picture of one
Just
hanging
one
in somebody's
swimming in the
very small
background.
boat,
If you can find a comic, with the letters in the word shark, we also need to know about all of those.
It's very important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is why we love you.
Yeah. Kirby. See how
She's looking out for you.
You got my back.
Yeah, I just ping pong. It was like a boomerang. It hit you on the way back. The love just came whoop back.
All right. And then our final comic that we read was the October Faction. And this was a comic that I have heard hyped a bunch, that a lot of people have talked good and bad about. And I finally got to read it. And I have many thoughts about it. Like 98% of them are positive. And I am curious, before I start gushing about this book, what everybody else thought about it. Okay,
I'll start.
Go ahead, Kane.
I didn't actually get to finish it because I was just told to read it last night. But what I did read, I really liked, and I really liked what they were saying in the beginning about the word monster, where it comes from, what people think of monsters, how the world has adapted. I mean, much like we were talking about earlier, where in this day and age, monsters are different to people than they were back then. And I actually got to thinking about when he was talking about the word monster, and where it could also have come from the other word. Was it French? Monreur or something?
Oh, yeah.
Monsieur.
No, not that one. It was the French
helper.
word, and to teach, like teacher.
Yeah. And I got to thinking about, like, Igor and, Frankenstein's monster and stuff like that, and just how, monsters have adapted over the age. I thought that was really cool. Mm-hmm. And I was glad that they talked about that in there.
Yeah, no, I actually... One of my biggest problems, and one of the things I always focus the most on in any book, graphic or not, that I read is how exposition is handled. Because I know some people get really particular about exposition, and they're like, oh, you can't have it. Like, you should, show, don't tell, show, don't tell. I believe, personally, exposition is very useful. And...
Absolutely.
Many times it can be done in a way that, yes, you are telling the audience a thing or telling your reader a thing, but that's the clearest and best way to communicate information to your audience before you go on with the things that you do want to show them. And so I like seeing exposition handled well, and I think this book did a pretty good job of that. So this book introduces their world to you in a pretty unique way. It starts in a like Indiana Jones type setting where the I guess main character, the father figure, is teaching his class on monsters and literature. And he's just kind of talking about, like, well, what does it mean to be a monster? Why do we look at monsters? Why do we think of them this way? Sort of things like that. And you can kind of gather from the way that he's talking and from the way other characters interact with him later that he is not only looking to teach his students the literature aspect of monsters and just kind of using that as a cover, he's also looking for his successor. And so I thought that was kind of cool, the way that it was done, where you could tell that he's on the lookout for a successor, but he has 2 children already. And I don't want to spoil too much about their relationship, but it is a pretty interesting relationship between the father and his children. And they feel sort of left out from his life because he wants to protect them. And I think a trap that many books fall into of this particular sort is that they either focus too much on monsters and not on the family at all, or too much on the family and not at all on the monsters. See Supernatural in some seasons. And then when you do get actual family story, the family's just kind of the stereotypical, where it's like, oh, the nagging wife, the absent dad, the snarky teens who don't like each other and who fight all the time and who secretly just want daddy's attention. And this book definitely starts out that way. And what I would urge people to do is read past that first, I think it's the first 2 issues that kind of read stereotypical family with a non-stereotypical problem, because those characters develop rapidly and really well, and they get fleshed out in a way that makes you really care about all of these characters, and you see that they are acting certain ways because they are trying to fit in. And I think not only is this a good monster comic for that, because they have to fight monsters and you see a lot of cool monsters that get brought in, but it's a good comic for just for everybody to read, because it focuses on that feeling of not belonging, and what it means to be family and what it means to have a family. And I just, overall, I think it's a great comic.
Something everyone can relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, the art in this is fantastic.
I thought the art looked really good.
It's super great.
It was weird.
Messy.
Yeah. It was hard to get into, at least for someone like me who, is really used to the very clean superhero look. It was very hard for me to get into the art in this book. But then once I started picking up the way that the lines were moving, it started making a lot more sense.
The action, for me, the action was always done in a way that I could follow what was happening. The thing I had the most problem with would be the expressions. And sometimes the expressions on people's faces didn't quite match the emotions I think that the writer was trying to convey. But that was countered by awesome colors that really set the mood, so that even if there was kind of this disconnect between the faces and between what was happening, the colors really carried the art. So the art is a little jarring in some parts. If you're used to a certain style, it might be a little hard to follow. But ultimately, I think that this is a book that if you're interested in like family relations, or if you like that type of comic, if you like supernatural, if you like monsters, you'll enjoy this book.
And if you do get used to the art, you should check out stuff by Temple Smith, such as Wormwood Gentleman Corpse, 30 Days of Night, etc.
Yeah, he did the writing for this. It was the same guy who did 30 Days of Night.
Yeah, I actually kind of wanted to make a comment regarding that a little bit. Mostly because Steve Niles has some really serious horror cred that I think should be commented upon just in general. I'm a fan of 30 Days of Night, actually. But I thought this was kind of a cute thing to add as far as that goes. Niles has been a horror fan for a very, very long time. Even to the point that there was... he talks about being inspired by a late-night horror television host. That was really cute. That was Count Gore Duvall. And I think it's kind of funny that Count Gore ended up writing an introduction to one of his graphic novels too. And Niles is really reminiscent of Richard Matheson. So I would say, as far as people who may be interested, anybody who liked I Am Legend, Niles' work in general has some of the same feelings as like Richard Matheson's work. So just from the literary standpoint, I guess, if you've got that horror fan, like novel reader in your life, I think that any of Niles' work could comfortably fit on their shelves. 30 Days of Night in particular is just really great. So I don't know. He also wasn't formally educated for writing, which I think is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. You just kind of launch yourself at something that you love, so good on him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Also, I wanted to bring this up. So we picked, it was kind of a democracy. It was weird. You don't want to know the bureaucracy that went into the books that we picked, but we more or less tried to keep equal says involved in the picking of these books. Obviously, these are not the only monster comics out there. Some of the books that I really wanted to talk about, we couldn't really talk about because they would be long runs at least. Specifically, Hellboy and Swamp Thing. There are so many great comics that feature monsters really heavily, that feature zombies, that feature vampires, that if you are interested in monster comics, you should just start picking things up. There's The Goon, which I haven't read too much of, but I've seen a couple of... there's an animated short, and I will post a link to this, but there's an animated short that was floating around a couple years ago of what would be a trailer to a possible Goon movie. And it's great. And it's wonderful. And it's done in the same art style. And it features zombies and the little guy. I can't remember his name. But the Goon's partner. But it features the little guy and his buddy, which is just a zombie that's tied up and can't bite him because his like jaw is gone or something like that. So they just spend a night out drinking and playing pool, and it's wonderful. But yeah, so I don't know if you guys had any sort of favorite monster comics. Kit, you look like you have some favorite monster comics.
I'm nodding enthusiastically because this also ties into Steve's sort of work. I don't know how many people here have had a chance to read this, and when we were thinking about what scary books we wanted to read, there was some waffling and consideration, and I can't believe this didn't pop to mind sooner. Simon Dark. Has anyone read Simon Dark?
But I've seen some of the stuff.
Sounds dark.
It's a little too spooky for you. But
Whoa.
Simon, someone has to bust it out. Simon Dark is a character that was created by our glorious author here, Steve. Okay, so who likes nursery rhymes?
I do.
Who likes spooky nursery rhymes? I'm looking directly at Kirby, who watched The Babadook with me. So here's a little something for Simon Dark here. Lurks in shadows, hides in the park. Simon, Simon, Simon Dark. If you're good, he'll stay away. If you're bad, he'll make you pay. So Simon Dark is an interesting one. Active in Gotham City. Actually, there's a lot of heavy implications that that's the case. I can't remember if it's ever text, like that they specifically say that he works in Gotham, but it's pretty obvious that he's in the Gotham metropolitan area. But as far as Simon Dark goes, made from the bodies of 20 boys by a desperate medical genius who turned to dark cult for assistance. Simon and several other characters were created using science and magic, but only Simon was created with a purpose to stop a dark cult that created him. And for those people who are Gothamites and fans of the cult happenings in DC books, I would flail my arms lovingly at you because this is a nice opportunity to get more spooky DC in your life. And again, beautiful, strange, fantastic art in this book. So let me see. Yeah. Let me look at this here. It's very painterly stuff. Very inky, very painterly. And anybody who is interested in the aspects of urban legend in comics and superheroism, I think, would see why he's a good fit for Gotham. So if you like superheroes and you like spooky, it might be a fun combo to enjoy, especially if you enjoyed this Niles pick already. So, throwing that out there. Available at your local library. I shelved it 2 days ago.
Also available at your local comic book shop.
Yes. If you know of any local comic book shops, then, you could probably go there too. I guess that would be cool.
Do you know of any at all?
Mm-hmm. Olympia might have some. I don't really know. I don't read comics. I don't care. Yeah. So.
Comics are for nerds.
Yeah, for nerds. But yes, spooky.
Yes.
I was making gestures at Kayleigh because I thought of another one that everyone should read, and Kayleigh's probably going to glare at me after I say this, but you should read Tarot Witch of the Black Rose because it's got a bunch of monsters in it, and maybe there's plot.
Oh my god.
There could possibly be plot. I don't know if there is or not.
No, there is no plot. There are nipple blades.
Is there plot hiding in the cups or between the thighs?
I mean, she goes and then she's got like her clothes fall off, and then and then something happens. I'm not sure.
Tarot.
There's a back matter about it.
Yeah. That holds a special place in my heart as something that I don't know if I love just how awful it is and how much I hate it, because I actually kind of enjoy having a thing to hate. Or if there's a part of me that actually kind of loves it because it's so awful. So I don't know. It's this weird between really, really hating it and also maybe slightly loving it.
You were on that back matter, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Joe made me read that. Yes.
Joe made it. I read it all like in one sitting.
It was too. It was a lot.
My brain was melted.
Yes.
Not in a good way. Did I tell you, I think I mentioned my favorite part, though, on it, where the guy's, like, falling, and then he grabs, like, the statue nipple, and then he's like, I guess this makes me the breast man.
Oh, yeah. Good Lord. God. If that book has nothing else going for it, boob puns are fantastic.
Yeah, it's just nonstop. Anyway, don't read Tarot Witch of the Black Rose. I was totally joking. It's terrible.
Alrighty. Yeah, so that's kind of, some monster comics that you can check out.
Another one would be, or at least it does monsters in a different way, would be Gunner Creek Court, which has been pitched many times on View from the Gutters. But, like, in the very first issue, they introduce a ghost who becomes the main character. So that was pretty cool. And dragons and stuff.
I have still not read that one.
Can I get that title from you one more time?
Gunner Creek Court.
Gunner Creek Court?
GUNNERKRIGG. Space Court.
Oh my goodness.
It's Are you okay? It's a science school for hard sciences and ethereal sciences, which is magic. And it was a webcomic. Well, it's still ongoing actually, but there are like 8 trades out now.
Very cool.
It is very good.
So, any other thoughts about just monster comics in general? Things that you want to talk about the history of monster comics? Maybe how well the medium works for monster comics?
I don't know what you're talking about. Kayleigh is...
I'm referring to
I'm
the
so
pile
used
of
to
reference
Kayleigh-
material.
I'm so used to Kayleigh waggling her eyebrows at me that I can no longer understand when a hint is being thrown. So there's that.
I'm in the middle of it right now.
In the middle with you.
You picked a dangerous spot to sit.
Yeah, this
I should just hide in this fridge.
Yeah. I brought a little bit of reference with me for anybody who might be interested in understanding why it is we thought it was important to have a Spookyween Spooktacular about horror comics. The book that I was looking through in preparation for this was The 10 Cent Plague, the Great Comic Book Scare and How It Changed America. What I was looking at in here was the influence and draw of horror comics, not just in the field of comics as we know it, but in popular culture as a whole. It's said in this book that by 1952, 1/3 of published magazines in the United States were horror comics. If that isn't a compelling reason to talk about the importance of horror as a genre on the building of the comics industry, I don't know what is. So, there's some stuff in this book that would be interesting to anybody who is interested in comics as a whole, like talking about horror comics' role on the creation of the Comics Code Authority. It was the proliferation of these horror comics that caused the great moral panic that made us sit and go, kids are getting funny books in their hands. And they made these great PSAs and everything about little boys joining each other in the woods to swap comics and then find a smaller child to tie to a tree and then torture with penknives. So it's kind of fun in this day and age, especially the week that we're recording this, because this is Banned Book Week. And it's important to think about censorship's role in comics as we know it. And horror, of course, is always kind of at the forefront of the morality police and, under the gun. So throughout the history of comics, we've had tons of people that have taken extra precaution or extra attention to the idea of policing the medium, because not only do we have to be concerned about the power of words, we have to be concerned about the power of image. It is always going to be a thing. Unfortunately, you get these people coming up with bans and things as recent as this year. I know we've talked before about the Crafton Hills incidents going on with the Sandman and everything. And I just think it's worthwhile to mention that people should maybe, for further reading, check out the 10 Cent Plague and understand why it is that we have things like, say, Vertigo as an imprint, that it is important and interesting that our Archie selection is one of the first cases where Archie has published a book that would not have fit under the comics code, and why having these things that don't fit code is important to be able to share the kind of stories that can entertain and frighten and challenge people with the medium. So just a reading rainbow moment. If you're looking for books with a small section for pictures, 10 Cent Plague might be a thing. So,
also, if you're really interested in learning more about censorship and kind of the ideas that went on around that, then you should read Seduction of the Innocent by Frederick Wortham and Max Allan Collins, because that was kind of the book that convinced parents and teachers and news anchors that comic books were this evil that needed to be snuffed out and corrected. So reading it will probably make your blood boil, but it is good for education purposes.
If your blood does start boiling, to piggyback off of that, there are things you can do to channel that into something. If given the opportunity, I will always pimp Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. Get involved. If you care about the future of comics and have a problem with censorship keeping you from such cool stories as are demonstrated in this show and others, take a look. Learn a little bit about the impact of what comic censorship has had, I guess, on the medium, and how far we've come in some respects. It is very worthwhile to inform yourself on what people seem to think you can and can't read.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that a call to action is a good spot to wrap up, unless anybody else has anything else to say.
I think you look really nice, Kayleigh.
Oh, thank you. I think everybody in this room looks really great.
I'm going to take a moment to describe how good everyone looks. Really good.
Really good.
Podcasting is a visual medium, as we all know, so you can imagine how good everyone looks right now.
Super good. Okay. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Yes. Sweet screams. No, sorry. I had to. I didn't have to. I just did.
You just did.
Yeah. Sweet screams.
Good night, children.
Good night, children.
Thanks for listening to our show, everybody. Special thanks to theouthousers.com for posting our episodes. You can always keep up to date with everything we're doing by checking out our website at viewfromthegutters.com. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel as we post new videos every week. You can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at ViewFRTHGutters. And please be sure to leave us an iTunes review, as it really does help new listeners find the show. And thanks again for listening. And as always, keep reading.